The information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is essential to consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any medical concerns, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, and any actions taken based on the information presented are at your own risk. Welcome everyone, we're so glad you made the choice to watch our show this evening and joining us for another episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast with your hosts Steve Hodgson and Dr. Eric L. Davis. On tonight's episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast, addiction deeply affects not just the person using, but also their loved ones. An addict gets caught in a trap that can be very difficult and vicious to try to get out of. Mood regulation, memory, willpower, and the decision-making processes are also impacted with drug abuse. These changes become more fixed with regular use as a drug dependency is formed. Drugs that are addictive cause difficult withdrawal symptoms and cravings, making it hard to stop taking them. Tonight we will delve right into this serious problem affecting America today. According to the 2023 United States National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 48.5 million, that's 16.7% of Americans, age 12 and older, battled a substance use disorder in the past year. It's important to know the facts about addiction to better understand how specific substances can impact your life. Whether it's a problem with alcohol, opioids, cocaine, or any other substance, addiction kills thousands of Americans every year and impacts millions of lives. Addiction or substance use disorder is a chronic mental health condition. Because a substance use disorder affects the brain's normal functions, it can compel someone to repeatedly use substances or engage in behaviors even though they have harmful consequences. Addictions can destroy marriages, friendships, and careers, and threaten a person's basic health and safety due to the many health issues they cause. Here are some interesting facts. Almost 21 million Americans have at least one addiction, yet only 10% of them receive addiction treatment. About 25% of people who use illicit drugs develop an addiction. 24% of people with a drug disorder have an opioid use disorder. In 2020, the federal budget approved for drug control was nearing $35 billion. About 9.5 million Americans who have a substance abuse disorder also have a mental illness. More than 70% of people who tried an illegal drug before the age of 13 have an addiction to alcohol or drugs. Americans between the ages of 18 and 25 are most likely to use addictive drugs. Tonight we will also have a serious discussion with a son who has been battling his addictions in and out of rehab, and we will also have his father join us discussing the effects of the addiction on the family both mentally and financially. Sit tight and enjoy one of the most compelling stories of our podcast. Let's welcome hosts Steve Hodgson and Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast. My name is Steve Hodgson, and of course with me is psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis. And I want to mention tonight, before I say hello, is that he's a licensed clinical addiction counselor as well as the master addiction counselor. So, Dr. Davis, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing really good.
Good.
Doing well.
I apologize to anyone that was watching and may have seen some weird stuff going on there on YouTube, because for some reason we weren't broadcasting, then we were broadcasting, then we weren't broadcasting, but it seems they fixed whatever the error was, so we're going good. So as we said in the intro, tonight we're going to talk about something very serious, which is drug addiction. We will most likely cover gambling addiction next week, as Dr. Davis and I talked about, but tonight we're going to focus on drug addiction, how it affects our body, mind, and spirit. We're going to discuss how it affects the individual who's doing the drugs, as well as family and close friends around them. And we'll be bringing into this conversation in just a little bit a father and son dealing with this very same issue we're talking about. We will discuss his addiction, attempted treatments, the cost both emotionally and financially with having the problem. So let me begin with you, Dr. Davis. What is addiction?
So addiction, what I always say, this is one of my most frequently asked questions, which probably makes sense. But I always say that addiction it's classified as a brain disease. But when we talk about addiction in society, we typically talk about it in the context of chemical dependency. So, for example, if I'm watching the news and they say, so and so was addicted to heroin, then what that means is they're physically dependent on heroin, chemically dependent. If they stop using heroin, they go into withdrawal. But I want to propose that, and this is something that has helped me both as a professional and a person in recovery myself. I believe that addiction and chemical dependency are two entirely separate things. And what I mean by that is, chemical dependency is completely and totally curable. It's cured all the time. When people go into detox, or when people, basically like if someone goes on Vivitrol or Suboxone, that's a longer term outpatient detox. So then the question is, well, if chemical dependency and addiction aren't the same thing, what is addiction? And I look at addiction as the thinking and the behaviors that existed before I ever used, all the while I used, and continue to stay there even after. And that's why this is a long-term treatment. It's not something that just goes away. And I hate when I hear the word cured with addiction, because please remember that cured would mean that somebody in recovery like me could, hey, let's go out and drink in moderation, or it's not going to be possible. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And I want to get the monkey out of the room, as they say. Okay, because so many people will say, and we'll ask Blake about this later, all you have to do is stop taking the drug. Okay, well, and then you don't have a problem anymore. And, there's much more to that. So my next question is, would you consider addiction a disease?
Yeah, actually, so the American Medical Association does classify it as a brain disease, but I heard something from a guy he goes by I think it's Joe McQuarrie. Anyway, there's a series called Recovery Dynamics. It's a really old school curriculum. And it talks about the 12 steps and things. And something that he said in there is, he said, whether or not we believe that addiction truly is or isn't a disease, we all will agree that it is something that causes dis-ease. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was like, all right, so even if it's not, which it is a disease, but even if it wasn't, it's like, all right, well, we can agree that it, causes a dis-ease.
When you're doing drugs, and I'm in my mid 60s. Okay, I can tell you that I've done some of my share over the years. Okay, that drug takes you over sometimes, and those people that say just stop taking it, it's not that easy to stop taking it. Now I know it's a bit the same for alcohol and drugs, and just in case somebody's watching us for the first time tonight, okay, you are a recovering alcoholic, correct?
And I mean, yeah, I'm recovering from multiple things.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, that's what you were talking about before. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that. So how does substance use change our brain and the parts of the brains? What parts of our brains are affected by that change?
In a nutshell, all of them. So, but the primary area that's affected is the reward center, or the dopamine pathway, and then the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that helps us to make decisions rationally, practice impulse control. So it's kind of a double whammy with addiction, because we're taking that substance, and that substance is intoxicating us, but at the same time, it's hijacking the pleasure center and dumbing down, or lessening the strength of the prefrontal cortex. So it literally does biologically affect our ability to make rational decisions.
So as someone who's doing that, then if you're saying it affects our brain that way, are they responsible for their actions?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. We have a saying in the recovery world where we say, I didn't choose addiction, but I do choose recovery. And it's like, I've never met anyone that said, well, I woke up one day and I said, please give me addiction. Now I'll take that and a side of fries, or whatever. And that's just not how it happens. So it's kind of like an allergy in that, how do you find out you have an allergy? You break out, you come into contact with something or whatever. And with addiction, it's kind of the same way, because most people start out just experimenting or trying to have a good time,
Right.
But the wheels eventually come off.
So another thing that we hear so much about is that people don't want to admit they have a problem. And of course, I don't need to tell you, the first thing is acknowledging that you have a problem before you can start getting help. Why is it so hard for someone to admit, hey, this has gotten beyond me, it's out of my control, and I need help?
That's so one, first and foremost, I think just pride, as a person. It's like, well, I don't want to admit that I've come across a lot of clients who are extremely successful in life. You know what I mean? They own businesses, businessmen, businesswomen. And the thing that I've heard multiple times is they'll say, I can run this whole company. I can run all of this. I can be organized. I can, several different departments, etc. Why can't I control this? And I think that is and it's because it's different. It's not the same as running a company, or, it's because there's a biological predisposition.
Right. I was just going to say, there's no chemicals involved with running a company,
Right.
that's running through your body. And it's those chemicals that get you hooked on that. We know so many people that don't have their drug use under control. I mean, I've seen a few over the years, and, oh, no, I don't have a problem and stuff. How do we get those people to seek help?
That's really difficult sometimes, and that is the hardest part of my job. Is all I can do is, try and educate, make suggestions, etc. But, everybody's self-determined. So whether the person does anything with the information, that I give them is totally up to them. So it's like I'm the only person that can take responsibility for my addiction, number one, and number two, my recovery. I mean, that's the hard part, is I can suggest things till I'm blue in the face, but so I told students in the past, like interns that we've had, I've told them, I've said, sometimes someone will come in for, substance use disorder treatment, and all we will accomplish the whole time they're here is we will make them maybe start to consider they might have a problem. I mean, and so unfortunately it takes, unfortunately for some individuals like, me back in the day, like I was like, oh, now that I got this, this will be fine. It's just, no, it wasn't.
Yeah. And then the worst part, which we'll be talking in a few minutes about when we bring Jim and Blake in, is the cost. Some of these places are not cheap. And I'm sure I can see Jim, nodding his head off, though we can't see him yet there. Insurance pays for some of it. The Obamacare, I guess, paid for some of it, the Affordable Health Act, Medicare, Medicaid, and stuff. But, it's got to be tough on somebody having a problem, and it's probably costing them financially, that doesn't have someone to pay for it to get treatment.
Yeah. But, the thing is, there are resources available where even if a person doesn't have insurance, and even if they don't have any money, there are resources. You just have to look. There are places around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there's so many drugs we can talk about. Okay, methamphetamine, which is what this was originally set up for, cocaine, hallucinogens, synthetic marijuana, inhalants, ketamine, fentanyl, ecstasy, benzos, and a lot more. I laugh because it almost sounded like when I was growing up in Greenwich Village, you'd walk through Washington Square Park, just cutting through the park to get to my house, and these guys would follow you, actually reading off a list of the drugs they were selling. There's a lot of them. Now, tonight, we're going to really focus we got to focus some on meth, but we're going to talk about heroin as well because that's the main problem here tonight. It's highly addictive drug. There's no question about it. Um, it affects a person's brain, changes how the brain functions. You know, I mean, it really travels to the brain really quickly. And most of the people inject it. There's some that snort it. There's some I think that even smoke it. But what I'm going to do at this point now, because I can talk all I want, but most people want to see these two gentlemen I just pulled into the room with us right now, and they're Blake and Jim. And guys, I really want to thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, because this is a very important topic. Okay, there are many people that out there that have a problem that might be watching tonight and not realizing that it's out of their control. So, Blake, I'm going to start with you. Let's go back to the beginning. How did you begin to start using heroin?
I started with prescription opiates back when I was probably sixth, seventh grade. Got hurt. Basically got a prescription from the doctor. Got a little taste of it, and then after that, I kind of found a surplus between my dad got sick and he had prescriptions. My grandma had prescriptions. They were just kind of really around. So I found my way into those bottles really quickly, and before I knew it, I was kind of, hooked on those. Whether it started with, partying from seventh and eighth grade, but by the time I got to high school, I was pretty much doing pills every day. I mean, it started with hydrocodone, and then the OxyContin train rolled around, and when that was really big, and Purdue Pharmaceuticals started pushing those really hard, I found myself in that trap, and that's kind of what led me to heroin as a more cost-effective way to make it work for myself.
You see, I know a little bit. I talked to Jim about it the other day. That was from the injury that the doctors gave you.
Yeah, I'd broken my nose. One time I broke my ankle. I mean, there were several. I mean, even just going to the dentist, they'll give it to you.
Mm-hmm. Now, this was back, was what, the 90s or 2000s?
I was say, yeah, I was born in 93, so probably early 2000s, 2007, right. 2008 when I started.
See, really, and I'm sure Dr. Davis will agree with me that doctors back then didn't realize, I think, as much as it was going to hook you. Am I correct?
No. Yeah, no, that was the whole disclaimer about the OxyContin, was that it was supposed to last 12 hours, and you wouldn't have to take it as much. And then people quickly found out that the more you did it, the more your tolerance built up, and you were quickly going from 10 milligrams 4 times a day to 120 milligrams or 80 milligrams 4 times a day, and before you know it, you're getting 360 Oxy 80s a month from the doctor.
Wow.
Which isn't my story necessarily. I wasn't getting that much pills from the doctor, but I had, like I said, I had access to plenty, and then it became a very expensive habit once the actual prescriptions cut off.
I've seen that happen a lot with where, it starts with a legitimate medical issue, and I mean what he's describing is absolutely right. I mean,
when I would go into treatment facilities, they would ask me, like, do you have underlying issues with depression, anxiety, this and that, mental disorders? And I'm like, no, I just started from getting prescription bottles. Like, it wasn't anything that I had underlying. Like, I wasn't depressed. I wasn't anxious. I don't have any, like, bipolar or anything like that. It was just, hey, I had access and I wanted to party at a very young age, and going through puberty and partying like that, it quickly changes the chemistry in your brain to where it's like, okay, you have to have this substance.
How hard was it to get when the prescriptions and the supply around you ran out?
Back then it was really accessible because there were so many doctors giving out so many prescriptions that it was almost like everybody I associated with was doing that stuff too. So there was like a ban on OxyContin when they stopped making them in crushable pills, and they made them with like this plastic filler. And when that happened, there was another company that created roxicodone, and that was like a huge drug in my town, and a lot of people were doing that. So I had a lot of access to those as well, but they were really expensive. So it was wheeling and dealing and stealing and finding every single way I could to get it. It consumed all of my time,
Eric,
every second I had.
Dr. Davis, you got any questions you want to pick up from?
Sure. Do you remember when you first realized that there was a problem? Like, do you remember that moment of clarity?
Yeah, probably 16, 17 years old. I was like, really it was the first time I got sick, when I didn't have it and I got sick. And at first it was like, maybe I got the flu or something. And, I'm like, damn, this is terrible. And I had no idea why, but I knew that I was craving it. You know what I mean? I was like, well, this doesn't make sense. And then I remember a day there was this kid at school and he was like, hey, I got some Tins and I was sick going to school. And I ended up doing one in the bathroom, and I instantly felt better. And I was like, "Oh crap, this is what this is." And then I, go on the research, and shortly after that, my parents are on my ass about it. They're trying to get me into treatment centers, and I'm fighting it tooth and nail. Like, I'm not trying to do this. Like, I wasn't ready. And I mean, if you're in recovery, that you're not getting better until you're ready to get better. You got to go through the shithole to get out on the other side.
I agree.
Yeah, I fought that for another 10, 12 years. Yeah, another 10 years of really going hard. I mean, I did 10 years on heroin alone, but that 4 or 5 years of doing pills, it definitely created that monster.
Now, the heroin you were doing was in pill form?
No,
injections?
yeah, no, I didn't get any of the pills. It was all powdered, or I never did tar. It was always a powdered heroin. Yeah, that was back before fentanyl was a thing. So when you bought heroin, it was actually heroin.
Right.
Yeah.
So real drugs back in the day.
People would die, but it wasn't, every single day you're seeing people drop like flies. It was, somebody did 3 grams and they died, not just one little snort or one shot or however you did it.
Right.
It's definitely different now.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so how did you end up getting off of it? Was it therapy? Was it 12 steps?
So initially it was Suboxone, and I went to an inpatient in Greenfield, Hickory House Recovery. It was my last one. This was like after like 9 or 10 inpatient rehabs that I went to. I went to this rehab in Greenfield, Hickory House Recovery. Basically, that was the last time I went in. I did 30 days in there. I got back on Suboxone. I had done Suboxone a few times as far as like doing that treatment alone. And that just seemed to be the trick for me, just being on it so long. But for some reason, I went to that treatment. I got out. I got into the rooms of AA and NA, mostly AA. I worked a program with a sponsor, and I stopped listening to my own choices and started listening to somebody else's for a while. And I did that for a few years, and it just seemed to work. And I've kind of been, doing my thing ever since, doing the right thing. Man. Yeah, I definitely. I had a slip up last year, and got a little taste of what fentanyl was for literally one time. I was trying to get off Suboxone on my own without a doctor. I didn't even tell my doctor. So I made it 11 days, and then I decided off the whim, I was like, I'm going to go get a bag. And I ended up going to doing it. I died on the spot. A bunch of stuff happened. I ended up on the side of the road, getting woke up, Narcan and stuff. And that was the last time that I had touched anything. It was March 1st. So March 1st of last year. But yeah, that'll be the last time.
That's sort of a wake-up call, but
yeah, I mean, that was after 6 years of recovery. I mean,
right.
I was sober 6 years and had that happen. So
that's the thing I think, a lot of people have to realize is that just like Dr. Davis talked about it before, where you're not really cured.
Never.
You're always an addict. Okay. And as terrible as that sounds that way, but I remember one of my neighbors when I lived in Connecticut was a recovering alcoholic. And, I used to ask him, how can you sit there when, we're at a barbecue and we're all drinking beer? And he used to say, because I'm still an alcoholic.
He knows
says,
the consequences.
Yeah, haven't drank in 10 years. He says, but I'm fine with it. I guess that's true. Now, you're married.
Yep.
Okay. I know you have, is it 4 sons?
I have 3.
Three. Okay.
Yep.
Why it says 4 in here? I have no idea. but how has your addiction affected your relationship with your son?
So
I mean, what did she say when you were found on the side of the road?
oh lordy, yeah, I almost lost my marriage over it. After being sober for so long, and then going back out and not saying anything that I was struggling or needed help or anything. It really kind of put a wedge between us for a while. I feel like things are a lot better now, but that when you break that barrier of trust that you built up, it's definitely it's hard to build it back. But it's put some strain on us, but she understands too, because she's in recovery herself. So she gets it, but still it definitely can cause some problems for sure.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, as long as she knows that's part of the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You
It's
know,
easy.
and-
It's easy to say, hard to walk through for sure.
Mhm. Dr. Davis, anything else you want to ask him specifically before I first move on to Jim?
Yeah, I think so. If let's just say someone's watching tonight that is starting to consider that they might have a problem, what would you recommend for them? What would your message be?
The first thing I would say is, you got to admit it to yourself first. The first thing you got to do is admit to yourself you have a problem. Tell somebody else you got a problem, and I would find a way to get into a room of other people just like you, so you don't feel crazy, because it's not something that goes away. And when you get into that room, you kind of get that weight off your shoulders, like, okay, I'm not the only person that feels like this, because like you said, it's not a problem that happens when the drug starts. It's when you're 5-6 years old, you're different. Everybody else don't know. So then when you find that clique of people that's the same as you, it's like, okay, I can feel a little bit better knowing that I'm not the only person that's like this.
And I'm going to go on the record. I mean, I know Jim and I've known Blake for a number of years back when I lived in Indiana. A talented person, and as I'm sure your dad's going to tell. I mean, he's always been extremely talented, and I guess I didn't know too much about it till later on when Jimmy and I were talking, and again too, Jim was also in my wedding. He was one of the groomsmen in our wedding too. So I mean, we go back a while, but I want to go over to Jim. Jim, again, thank you for being here.
Yep.
And I know as a parent, it's got to be hard to see your child struggle. Any parent has a problem with their children struggling. You want your child to have everything, have an easier life than we had growing up. I mean, that's just normal. But when was the first time you noticed that something was wrong?
Wow, that's a good question. I guess kind of when he got kind of bad, kind of nodding out at the table and always tired, or I just knew. I've been around. I've seen it. You can tell if you've been around people.
Mm-hmm.
All the signs were there. The people, the friends. When you switch up different groups of friends and things like that. I mean, he played sports and stuff. Then finally, when he kind of went, I guess, out, was different. A whole different group started coming around.
Were there any signs that you may have glossed over that that you didn't at first catch right away, and then it started to make sense later on?
Not really. I mean, I really didn't. I mean, he was pretty much kept it under control and not around me. But then again, I have my own business. I wasn't home a lot, so that's kind of my fault on that part, I guess, as a parent. I was always out hustling, making money.
Yep. Well, we all were.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't really get to see it. I guess I didn't pay as much attention to it as I probably would have if I'd have been home more.
Well, Dr. Davis, I think you can't blame him for not seeing it and stuff because I guess as a parent, just not my child. We hear that all the
Exactly.
time. Yeah. I mean, when you go to one of the PTA meetings, they say, your kid's flinging spitballs. No, not my child. He doesn't do that. I mean, and I can see the same way with maybe some parents having those signs right in front of them. The gym, of course, he noticed it at a certain point, but a lot of parents don't notice that.
I mean, there's no instruction manual. I mean, that's the thing is, and there have been so many parents that I've worked with through the years that, would express extreme regret. And I handled this wrong. And it's like, did you do the best you could? Did you come from a place of love? If the answer to that's yes, that's the best you can do. But the only Blake, I'm sure will agree with me. The only person that can work a recovery is our recovery is ourselves.
Absolutely.
The families in recovery also, but that's my message to parents is, don't beat yourself up. Someone's addiction is, I've had parents ask me like, what did I do wrong? It's like, you didn't do anything wrong. Well, how did I make them have addiction? You didn't make them have addiction. I mean, it's just, it's something we're born with or not.
Yeah, we're wired like this.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions you want to ask Jim, Dr. Davis?
Let me see. Well, when you think about Blake, in active addiction, what was the scariest time for you?
This last time, probably the last. Well, maybe. Well, there's been a couple times. I can say 2 times. It's really was really bad. I think back in when did you go into Shelbyville, like to the hospital? It was a blizzard in the middle of the night. They called me up. You need to get to you need to get to the hospital. Your son's not going to make it.
I'd probably 2016, 2015.
Right around anyway. Yeah, blizzard.
Been there.
I was in Columbus. Took me an hour and a half to get to there. But I got there, and luckily, they Narcan him. He was on Narcan drip, and he got out the next day. But that moment leading up to that, it was like, oh man, am I gonna make it in time?
Yeah, those times where I was really, really bad off, there was a lot of overdoses. I mean, a lot of overdoses. I feel like the worst times were where I was really doing bad it was probably right around the time I met my wife. We kind of just went on a spree. Hold on, buddy. We kind of went on this spree, and I was really hitting it hard, and I had the finances to back it at the time, and it all was crashing down. Every cent and every dime, every minute of my time was going into that. So, but there was, nights where I'd fall asleep with a sandwich in my mouth, with a sandwich in my mouth, and I'd wake up at 4:00 in the morning. My whole body would feel like it had a weighted blanket on it for a night. My ribs were bruised because I wasn't breathing enough through the night. It was rough, but I feel like those are the times that he's, referring to where it was, I look like a dead person walking.
Yeah. Jim, how has it affected your health and relationships? Do you think the stress has added to health problems, or?
Oh yeah, stress is definitely probably led into a lot of health issues. I mean, stress is bad, but I would never. I can't say my health problems is due to him, because it's not.
No, but it becomes stressful on you and your relationship with Laura. Everything has just become stressful.
Yeah, me and my wife at the time, it was we parented totally different. And I mean, I always had his back all the time. I mean, for my wife, she tried to be this hard love, whatever kind of person. And I feel, and Blake may not feel, but I do. I feel like she kind of dropped the ball on him, and wasn't behind him 100%. And I don't care what he does. I mean, I've got his back no matter what.
Right.
And he'll tell you that.
Yep.
It's actually your mic that was making the noise, Blake.
It was probably my kiddo.
Okay, it's just the breathing. I think being picked up.
Yeah, mine's
in the mic. There you go.
There we go.
Okay. First, I thought it was Jim, and I was like,
I did too.
Yeah, I saw you trying to play with your mic on the side.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we talked a little, Blake, about your history, and I know you gone for treatment a few times. Okay. Now, for legal reasons, like we saw in these disclaimers, I don't want to go into facility names.
Okay.
Just talk about when you talk about facility A or facility B.
Okay.
Okay. Tell us about what the programs were like for you. What did they entail?
Okay, so the first one I went to one in Indianapolis. It was a very short stay. It was kind of one of those forced situations where it was you need to go. We are forcing you to go get help. I got up there. You go in the first time you go into a treatment center. It's really scary. You go into this basically office room. There's a therapist in front of you, and they're asking you a million questions. What drugs have you done? How much have you done? Who have you done them with? Do you feel like you have a problem? And then, you go through this back and forth conversation, and they ask the parents about it. And basically, you either get admitted for inpatient, you get admitted for intensive outpatient, or I haven't done anything less than that, so I don't know what the other ones are called, outpatient, and then maybe some counseling. So for me, the first time was inpatient. So the first thing you go to is detox. Most, especially for opiates, they're gonna put you on a Suboxone regimen. There's two ways you can go: either 7 days or you can do it like a long-term medication-assisted treatment. So I opted for the first time. I opted just for detox. So they try to basically bring you in on that Suboxone. So you have to be sick for 2 or 3 days, depending on the facility. So that's kind of that first phase that I went through when I got there. They bring me back after my parents leave, and I go into this. It's basically what the first one was kind of like what you would expect a mental institution to look like. Not like cells or anything, but you have a room and you have a roommate. There's like a little cafeteria area and a living area. They kind of, get you settled in there. That first night's kind of scary because you don't know what's going to happen. And I made it through the first couple of days. You can't call home. So, you're just in this place where you're stuck with your own thoughts. You're coming off of medicine or drugs that you've never come off of before. So I was feeling, pretty scared. By about, I think day 4, I had it in my head. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this first one. So I think I made it about 6 days in that first one. I decided to leave, but I made it to probably one group on that first one. And I mean, if I would have had my ears open, it probably would have been a better situation. But that first one, I just wasn't open to doing any of the programming that they had to offer. Like I said before, you have to be willing in order to receive the information. So that was when I was about 18. The second one I went to, I was probably 21, 22. I went to one in Michigan. So I didn't have the access to leave so quickly this time. So I had an overdose, and they brought me up there, I believe, the next day. And my only requirement to go was I needed another bag, and I would go to treatment because I had no money. I was out of money. So I was like, you know what? If you buy me another bag, I'll go. And I remember my grandma taking me up there, and I did a shot of heroin in the back of her car. That was like really my first stoop to where I was like, this is what kind of person I am, at this point in my life. So I get up there. This place, the detox was actually in a cabin on a lake there, and then the actual facility was an old hotel. So it was a really huge facility. It was really nice. So I did the detox. It was the first time I had fully detoxed off anything with no medicine. They didn't put me on Suboxone or anything. It was like 7 or 8 days in the detox. That was rough, but I made it through. They had a hot tub. There was things to help you feel better in there. You know what I mean? And they definitely did the best they could as far as keeping you comfortable during that process. So after I transferred from the detox unit to the actual treatment program, I mean, I remember walking into the doors and I seen a friend of mine that I met up at Ball State. I used to go up there and party, and I'd seen him in there, and it was kind of cool just having somebody that I knew there. And so this was it was moral. The program that I went through, it was a moral recognition therapy program, MRT for short. So you basically got grouped up with different people or different groups of people, and you would go through these steps and present each week a different step that you're working on, or maybe every couple of days. I don't remember, but I made my way through that. It was about, I think, 42 days that I was over there. This actually was a pretty transformative experience for me. It did kind of like open up, things in myself that I didn't know about, and how my behaviors worked, and kind of what the wheels were turning in my head before I started using, during the addiction, and how it exacerbated or helped what I was dealing with. Because it's obvious the drugs are a solution as well as a problem. They're a solution before they're ever a problem.
I agree.
So when you get off of them, all that shit comes back. You're like, okay, well, I need to fix this shit now. So I started working on some of that stuff, and by the time I left, and I had a newborn baby at the time, he was 3 months old. I had to go, though. I was going to kill myself. So as I was graduating this program, they offered me an opportunity to go to sober living. One of the spots was in California, so I was like, that was really kind of my goal in high school. Is like, I wanted to go out west and surf and be out in that environment. So I went with that buddy that I had known from Ball State, and then a couple other of my buddies that I had met in the facility. We all go over to California, and we go to the sober living house. And I stayed there. I went through phase 1, relapsed in phase 1. I didn't even use heroin or anything. I used kratom, which is like a plant, but it was still the wrong thing to do. I was trying to alter my state, and I was trying to, kind of get around things the way that a good drug addict would do, try to get my own way. So they put me back in phase 1 again. I had to go all the way through that again. And I finally made it to phase 2, where you can have a job, you can drive, all of these things. Halfway through my phase 2, I ended up, me and another buddy, we decided we were going to go score a bag of heroin up in like Inglewood or something like that. I forget where we were going, but we ended up taking it's crazy. I took 2 buses and an Uber to get to this dude. I met him at a Home Depot inside, a guy I met off Craigslist. This is how crazy, the mind will work to get what you want. And we ended up doing that, doing the dope. I go to my home meeting. My house manager's there, catches me nodding out, and my other buddy nodding out. We get kicked out again. I go back to a detox, because that's your punishment for relapse, and you got to go back to detox and start the program all over again. So shortly after that, it was like probably the 3rd or 4th day into detox, I just decided, screw it, I'm going back home. I miss my girlfriend, I miss my kid. So for some reason, I thought that it would work there too. I can change my location, and things are all going to be better. I'm not. Yeah, exactly. I'm not hooked anymore. I don't have that physical dependence, so I'll be all right. I get back home. I probably make it a couple months, and I'm back on the wagon, full throttle, doing it again. Let's see. There's another one that I went to. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So I probably did another 2-year run after that, and then I decided it was time to go get treatment again. So I ended up. I think I got in some legal trouble, and my solution to that was to go to treatment. So I decided to go to treatment. I ended up in Clearwater, Florida. Another 30-day inpatient, and this place was more like a resort than it was a rehab facility. I mean, the groups were more like yoga and massage and art therapy, and it was like the there was a guy in there whose dad was the owner of the Buffalo Bills. Like, it was
Wow.
people like that were in there, so it was like super classy. They would take us to the beach on the weekends. The lady that was watching us would buy us she would buy us alcoholic drinks at the beach, let us drink, and then go back to the facility. Shortly after I left there, it closed down. I'm sure. I'm sure that's why, because not not the right shit was happening in there.
Sounds like it.
It was a good time for sure, but I definitely wasn't using any heroin. But it was access to weed and there was access to alcohol. It just wasn't, it wasn't a program where you want to get better. Um, Fast forward a little bit more. I come back home. I think I did all right for a while, and then I just kind of fell back into it. At this point, I wasn't doing heroin. I was using. I would try to. I would try to do meth. I would try to do coke. I would try to do anything but opiates. To kind of stay away from that physical dependence, because I felt like if that was the thing, if that was the problem for me, then I would be all right. And I did pretty good with that for a long time, and it always just ended up back with I'm doing heroin again. So I did that, and then shortly after that failing, I think I got in a little bit more legal trouble. So I go to a Suboxone doctor. I get on Suboxone. It was a weekly deal. So I basically went to this group every week. They gave me a weekly script, and I'd go talk in this group. I did that for probably 6-8 months, and then after that I moved to Florida, and this was just on my own accord. Me and my now wife, we decided to move to Florida. We get down there. It's like nothing I'd ever experienced anymore. I don't have access to my medicine. So on the way there, I'm thinking to myself, I have 3 Suboxones left. I'm going to just detox off those and I'll be fine because I'm changing my location again. It was like 3 days there. I'm driving on the beach with no license. I have a warrant in Indiana, and I get pulled over on the beach because I'm detoxing and I'm driving, and I'm just like, I gotta find something to not feel sick. Of course, I don't know anybody that does that type of stuff down there. It didn't work out for me, so I go to jail in Volusia County, which is Daytona Beach. I meet a guy in jail who did a night. I did a night and he did a night. He's a heroin addict, and I was like, I need your phone number. So the second I get out, the first thing I do is I meet up with that guy. He gets me a bag of dope. We hit it off after that. We're hanging out every single day, doing dope together. At this point, my wife was doing it too. Kind of dragged her into that, and so down there, it's so different because they'll just drive it to you. I mean, it's not like where I had to drive an hour every single day from Greensburg to Indianapolis. This is, you call somebody, they come, and they're 5 minutes away. And that to me was never something that I had experienced before. So that took my addiction to a whole nother level. I was able to get a lot more frequently. And that was probably the worst that I had ever been. So that lasts for, I think I was down there for probably about a year, 6 months to a year. 6 months to a year before I came back to visit my parents and to grab the rest of my stuff to move back. I get back to Indiana. I go to get some weed from somebody there, and I think the cops saw me or somebody called in on me. The next day, as we're leaving to go back to Florida, there's a sheriff's truck and an armored car following me down the country road by my dad's house. We get pulled over. We're literally on the way to Indianapolis to grab a bag of heroin to go back to Florida for the ride. I ended up going to jail. They won't let me out because of I had like 3 or 4 pending cases. They send me to prison. First time I ever go to prison. Only time I ever go to prison. So I did a year in prison. I get out. I parole out to Daytona. I think it was 3 or 4 days back home. I'm already back on the saddle again, doing heroin. And we did that for about another year. After that year, we come back home. I was using kratom to detox off the heroin to come home, because I called my mom and my dad and I was like, I got to come back home. I need to come home. It's just getting too bad. We're miserable. We're literally homeless. We're walking hotel to hotel at this point because our rental agreement had fallen through and it was just a bad situation. So after that, we come back home, and I mean, it was probably 2 weeks. I met up with one of my high school buddies who I thought would be a good person to hang out with at the time. I find out he's got some sort of terminal spine disorder, has a huge prescription to Oxycontin, and he's like, "You want to get high?" And I'm like, 2 weeks sober. So I'm back on the wagon again here. And shortly after that is when I went to that last treatment facility, because they took my oldest boy, they took him away from DCS, took him away because somebody had called in and said, hey, these people are up to no good. They came and drug tested us. We failed for heroin. They took him away. So that, I mean, it was 2-3 days later, I was in a treatment facility in detox. And that was the last time that I went to rehab. And for some reason, it wasn't like this treatment facility had any more or better information than the last one. It just happened to stick this time, you know? And
you feel like was different, you know, like, I mean, obviously what was different was you were ready, but you know, what felt different about it? Do you remember?
I think that just was the lowest, like one of my big, like my biggest thing is family. Like the people that I love is like the most important thing to me. So when that was taken away from me, it was like, okay, dude, like how much lower are you willing to stoop to? Like, I don't care if I'm hurting myself. Like that's one thing. But now I feel like, you know, I'm really hurting somebody else. I'm taking, you know, I'm hurting my wife. I'm hurting my son. I'm putting other people, you know, on the line now that this is happening. And I feel like that was just a wake up call that was like, okay, dude, you've got to get your head out of your butt. Like this is not going to fly. So from that point, I did the program. I got out, I worked a program with a sponsor, and I was like, I'm not going back to this. I don't want to live like this anymore. I was miserable. I was so miserable. I would have rather died than live like that, you know?
Would you say basically you hit like rock bottom?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, would you feel like that was the final rock bottom for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the lowest low I've ever dealt with right there. I mean, I'd been more addicted, I've been less addicted, but that right there, it hit me the hardest. Like losing my kid was like, you know, I'm not a bad dad. Like even through my addiction, that's one thing that I feel like I've always been as a good father. And I wasn't, you know, I wasn't about to like let that go. Like I'm not going to let that go. So we did everything we needed to do. It took, I mean, the shortest amount of time we could get him back was 6 months. It just was like a formality. But on that 6-month mark, we had him back. Like we did everything I wanted to do. And I stayed in the rooms religiously for probably 2.5 years. And then I kind of fizzled out of the rooms, and I don't go into them much anymore. I kind of have just like a group of guys that I talk to on a daily basis, and just, we kind of do our thing and check in and make sure everything's going all right. So I'm not in the rooms as much as I should be, but you know, I work a lot, and I mean, it's no excuse, but it's kept, I mean, like I said, I fell off the wagon. And I mean, when you kind of fall off of your recovery, you could fall right off the wagon too. So, I mean, I've definitely been checking myself since then, and just doing the right things, and knowing when my mind gets to that place, like, hey, you're just straying off this way, or you're straying off that way. You need to bring yourself back to center, make that phone call, and tell somebody what's going on.
You were talking about, you know, your son, and I mean, obviously you love your son. You're a good dad. It made me think of a saying I heard, which was, we say no to drugs and alcohol so we can say yes to the things that truly matter.
Yep.
And I always thought that was really cool. I've always, you know, kind of kept that in the back of my head, because if you think about it, those are the things that truly matter, you know, give up.
Yep. Give up one thing to have everything.
Yeah.
Dr. Davis, I got a question for you, but I was writing notes during the time there. One of the things I heard him say during it that made me question, a lot of people say, well, okay, I'm not doing heroin anymore. You know, I'm still maybe smoking a little bit of weed or something like that. But, you know, that's the thing that's good. The heroin stuff that's going to get me. Is that, and I'm not saying in Blake's case, but just in general, is that a smart idea? Because if you have an addictive personality, it's... I
mean, it depends on if you're, you know, so The only way to stop addiction completely from doing us harm is abstinence. I mean, that's it's just like someone with an allergy. It's like, well, if I don't want to break out, I don't eat strawberries anymore, whatever it is. From a harm reduction standpoint, I mean, here's the problem. Harm reduction is not going to work for someone like me who has substance use disorder. Like if I could practice harm reduction effectively, it wouldn't be a problem. So that's what I always keep in mind. But everybody's different. It just depends.
Yeah, I was gonna say I after so I did probably 2.5 years of complete sobriety, and then I smoked weed after that for probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, I think the last time I smoked weed was probably 3 months ago. But I mean, it's something that works for me. Everybody calls it Cali sober, but it's not for everybody. If you can still find yourself in those addictive patterns, even doing that, like even that, or having a drink every once in a while, or however you want to do it. But you tend to find that if you, especially with opiates and alcohol, a lot of people will switch over to alcohol. But for some reason, like I'm super hyperactive, so weed has always calmed me down. It's kind of been one thing that I've never really had a problem with that I could put down. So like I haven't smoked in a couple months, but the couple months prior to that, I was smoking every day. It's just one of those things I've been able to pick up and put down. But if you are a person that has this disease or at disease, you can definitely find yourself back in those patterns using whatever substance. It doesn't matter if it's even a substance. You can do it with food. You can do it with gambling. You do it with sex. It's anything. You can get it with going to the gym. Like, I find myself working too much. Like, it's just one of those things. I have that personality. So when you catch yourself, in those places where you're overusing something or overthinking about something or obsessing about something, it's time to rein it in and maybe take a look at what you're doing and find some perspective in that. So, but I don't recommend, I mean, if you're going to go out and shoot heroin and smoking weed's what's keeping you from doing that, by all power, like, do what you got to do. But,
Right.
I mean, the creator didn't make us stoned or high or drunk where we come with a clear mind, so that's probably the best way to stay. But at the same time, like, I'm all about the harm reduction if that's the route you're going to take, because I think there can be some medicinal substances, whether it be psychedelics, ketamine, weed. They all have their purpose, but they shouldn't be used as as a drug like that.
It's a recreational thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can do drugs recreationally, more power to you. But the people like us can't do that. Like,
well, because we have that energy, that addictive personality that we need to strive to do more. I mean, as I said when I started this, I don't know if you heard, I had my share. I mean, I grew up in I was in my 20s in the 80s. Okay. 70s, 80s and stuff. Jim's laughing, but you know what I'm talking about,
Exactly.
You enjoyed yourself back then. But again, the same way, I'm a very hyper and addictive person. And I mean, yours was heroin. I mean, I never got that bad with coke, but I was someone who enjoyed that a little too much, the recreational coke. And so I get a lot of what you're saying. I hear it, and I think there's a lot of people that are out there that are like us that hear that and
Definitely
can understand that. Now, Jim, I want to ask you, if I can.
Yep.
I know rehab and all that stuff's expensive.
Yeah.
Well, tell the listeners what that was like.
Luckily we had really good insurance, paid for most of it, but there's still a lot. I mean, the traveling to get to them, to go see them, things like that. People don't realize it's a lot to get out there. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and it ends up quick.
Yeah, and it really puts a strain on like your marriage and stuff. Like I said, I was always behind Blake, and so we would fight about that. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, how much money I spent, or it, I really couldn't even go there to tell you. I just know it was a hell of a lot of money, and he stole a hell of a lot of money from me.
Well, what I can tell you, to those that don't know, okay. As I said earlier, I know them. I know them really well. Jimmy and I used to hang out and stuff all the time together.
Yeah,
Okay, even business wise, he was a
exactly.
client of my web design and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was more than that. I mean, he was always been a friend. But I've always known that he's always looked out for Blake. Okay,
Always.
it's his son. He was
Always.
always a proud. No matter what, Blake, and I don't know whether you know it or not. No matter what was going on, he was still always proud of you.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, even your dad, Smooth, okay, was the same way. Okay,
Hey, he was 30 years sober.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh
So
yeah, he gave me a lot of shit. Grandpa gave me a lot of shit.
Oh yeah, he sure did.
Yep.
Well, you think he gave all of us a lot of crap?
Yeah.
But that's
did.
just who Daryl was. I mean, but
Yeah.
now
Super.
Jimmy, how does your daughter Brooke take all of this? How has she dealt with it?
Man, Brooke's pretty laid back.
Mhm.
She kind of just does her thing, but she worries all the time. I mean, she still worries about Blake. I mean, even today, I mean, she's always going to worry about it because she's seen what road he went or whatever, and she's seen him at his worst at home. And she was pretty young, but then on the other hand, we were so active. Brooke was a gymnast. Blake played soccer, baseball. I mean, but Brooke was she had gymnastics every day. She was a state champion.
I was going to say she was really big in gymnastics. I remember that.
Yeah, and Blake teaches gymnastics now. He's a good gymnast. I mean, he coaches 3 nights a week, Blake?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he coaches 3 nights a week gymnastics still. So he's great with kids. I mean, he's got his own personality. There's nothing not to like about him. If you don't like him, he don't give a shit.
Yeah, I think with Brooke, I think that it caused a lot of anxiety in her. Even to now, she feels like she's responsible for everyone. She's got to be the glue that keeps everybody together because she's seen so much at such a young age that it put this sense of responsibility in her. She even went to Al-Anon for a while to try to cope because not only me, my mom's in recovery as well, in and out of recovery as well. And so she kind of just does not relate with it at all. She doesn't have an addictive gene or bone in her body, so she just doesn't quite understand, but she's so sympathetic and understanding of how we feel and what's going on. And I think that it's just created that sense of, worry and panic and what's the next problem that's going to happen. And she wants to be all entangled in it, and it's just not healthy for her. So her way of coping is to kind of take that step back and be like, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do for me, which is fine. But I mean, it's my sister. I talked to her. I literally got off the phone with her right before we got on this call. Like I just got off the phone with her. So
you see, and I didn't. I'm glad I thought out the answer while you were talking there. I was just saying it's because she's a female. But that's why she's so worried. But it's the motherly instinct in a female. And that's what I mean before you start sending me emails, folks. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. It's that motherly instinct that she's going to be worried, about you no matter what. To make, oh, no, he's fine and stuff. But in the back of her head, she loves you and she's going to worry the same way your dad does, the same way your mom does. Everybody did. Okay, I'm going to, Monty Python used to say, and now for something completely different. I got some joint questions for you two as we get towards the end of this year. I want to start with communication breakdown, starting to rebuild trust. So I'm going to ask the question first, and then I'll let Blake answer, and then I'll let Jim answer the same question that we're asking here. Okay. What's been the hardest thing for you to say to your dad, Blake?
Honestly, that's a hard one because I feel like we've had a really open line of communication. I mean, from the get go. I mean, there's been times where it's been hard for me to tell him that I relapsed or that the probably the hardest thing is when I've ever stolen from him and had to, had to break it that I'd like took, a freaking big old hunk of gold to the pawn shop and said, "Hey, I need you to go get your ring or necklace out of the pawn shop." I mean, everything since, especially since being sober, it's been like, he's like, I'm like an open book, and so is he. So we've been able to pretty much talk to each other about everything as far as that goes. It's, yeah, he's one of the only people I've been able to do that with, where it's like, I've done some messed up stuff, and we've pretty much been able to rekindle, whatever trust or lack of communication we didn't have.
Jim, how about you? What was the hardest thing you've had to say to Blake during all of this?
Probably the hardest thing is when I told him he had to get out of my house. I mean, I couldn't do it anymore. It was just too draining on me. I mean, anxiety, worrying where he was at. Probably the most peaceful time I had, I hate to say it, was when he was in prison. I knew enough that he wasn't going to die, Well, not that you couldn't die in prison, but I mean, he wasn't going to he wasn't going to overdose in prison. He was, I knew where he was. I wasn't worried about where he was. When he was in Florida, I mean, he would call me up and say, "Dad, can you give me an Uber?" I would watch the Uber take him to the same fucking place every time back, and I'm paying for it. But anyway, like Blake said, we got an open book. I mean, there's nothing we can't talk about. I don't care what it is. And it's been that way. I mean, all growing up though, too. I mean, we sit down to eat. There was nothing that we could, I don't care what it was. If you want to talk about it at the dinner table, we're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel good and proud about that as a parent, to give them that line, if they need to talk about something, it's there, and not have to feel bad about it. No judgment. There was ever no judgment.
Now, what about you mentioned that, Blake had mentioned, where he had taken from you, had stolen from you. How did you start to rebuild that trust? Blake?
It was definitely a slow process. I mean, it's one of those things where at first, it's just letting somebody in your house and make it, and then it's, having access to the bedroom, and then, leaving me at home by myself or moving me back in. And, I mean, since then I've borrowed $1,000, paid it back. We have that, open thing where now he knows that, whatever I say, I have it back. You know what I mean? So if I wanted to borrow something, I would ask, and he knows that now. But there was a time, when you're in that mental state, it's not clear. So, on the other side of that, it's like, I'm not a piece of crap human being. So those habits kind of dissipate as you get into recovery. If you still have a stealing problem after you're sober, I mean, that's a problem. That's a whole nother issue.
That's a whole nother addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how we're going into. So Jim, you trust him.
I do, but man, back in the day, and me, I used to I carry a lot of money. I mean, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000. I mean, I'd have in my drawer, and man, he'd go there, and I think he'd just get a handful, hundreds, whatever. In the car business, I mean, you had to have money to make money, and it had to be cash, and he knew where I kept it. And I'd go in there, and it's like, damn, man, there's about $5,000 missing,
Peeled him
Did
back.
you have a combination to the safe?
Well, who took that?
I learned him.
I think, he knew the safe. Well, your mom took that money. She had to pay bills. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I got you. But then on the other hand, you had him bringing other people in, stealing from us too. I mean, that happened. Stole my guns and stuff like that. And hey, you know what though? It's a learning experience. I don't have no hard feelings about it. It's just we're grown up. We're best friends now.
Live and we learn.
Yeah, it's material stuff, even though it's expensive material stuff. But the fact is, you still have him. He's still alive.
That's exactly
He's still
right.
sitting here smiling in this room, laughing with us, healthy, sober. That's all that's important.
That's all that's important.
Yeah.
That's it. Material things. I mean, hey, He never did without anything. I got him anything he wanted.
Dr. Davis,
What were you saying?
do you
I'm
have
sorry.
any questions you want to ask them? And
No, honestly, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. And I just,
Yeah.
Blake,
Absolutely.
I know how hard it is, man. And, stick with it.
Definitely.
It's definitely a better life. And, that's my message to anybody is there is a better life out here. It's, if you want it, you can have it.
It's there for you.
It's a matter of doing it.
I think just to say something real quick, like today, this is a big thing for him today. He's really told his story, kind of, not his whole story, but a lot of it, and that's got to be, for him, that's got to be gratifying to be able to, if it just helps one person,
Absolutely. Yeah.
we've said that many times with this show that even if it helps one person.
Yeah,
that's
one
all
person. That's all you want.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I'm not looking to go viral and all that stuff. If there's one person that watches it and hears something that either helps them or allows them to help someone else, then we've done our job. That's here. Like the one last question before I start to wrap up the show. Here, what advice right now, if there's somebody that's listening to this, and remember this show isn't just live; it sits out here. So as we start to play clips and stuff out on Facebook and stuff, it starts to pick up. People start to watch it. We get a couple hundred people easily watching it. What would you say to someone who's sitting in the position that you were in back then? What would you tell them now?
I'd say to reach out for that help earlier. As soon as you know that you got something going on, find somebody and open up. Because it only gets lower and harder, and it's no fun being on that side of things.
Yeah, definitely not. Guys, I want to thank you for being on our show tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
I want people to know that both Blake and Jim in the very near future are going to do their own podcast. Okay, they're going to talk to their audience, talk to other people with problems, openly and honestly, just like they've done here tonight. And I think that concept will be informative, heartfelt, and I know I probably can talk for Dr. Davis. We'll both be subscribers and watching the show as well. Because, it's a fantastic premise. And all I'll say to people is, we'll talk about it in the coming shows. When the show's on, I'll make sure we mention it. I'll make sure it's always in the comments for this one as well. When the show starts and stuff, and what it's actually, they're still working on a title. So here's the people: if you think of a good, catchy title,
send it over. Yeah, send it over.
Yeah,
I got one.
What's that?
I got one.
What you got?
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. There you go. That hits it on the head.
Yeah, and that's going to be, believe it or not, that will be a good catchy title for people to watch too.
Yeah.
Okay, when on that, so
we're excited.
Yep.
So, guys, I want to thank you for joining us tonight on the show again. You don't know how important I think it is. We don't do this show for money. There's no sponsors.
No.
But that's not what the show is about. I mean, I've said it from the day one. Okay, that all we're doing is just trying to help people with different topics. Okay, next week we're going to be talking about gambling addiction, as I said too. Okay, which Dr. Davis has good experience in working.
I was going to say I could probably touch on the gambling addiction too.
Yeah, I might have to chime in on that myself.
Yeah, but okay, just folks, if you're watching and you've watched this, please do us a favor: hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. All that does is it helps us, not the money, but it helps put us higher up in the ratings. So when people are looking for a podcast and stuff, they'll find us here. And remember, until then, there's a place where every episode is a journey into the heart of what truly matters. And that's your health, your adventures, and the issues shaping our world today. We ask you to join us each week as we delve into captivating stories, expert insights, and thought-provoking discussions like the one tonight on everything from wellness to triumphs that define the human experience. So whether you're seeking inspiration, practical tips, or simply a moment of reflection, we hope this podcast will be your compass for navigating life's diverse landscapes. Remember, your story matters, your journey matters, and above all, your life matters. God bless you all, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you for joining us for this week's new episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast.
Awesome.
Please be sure to join us again
Great
next
job,
week
guys.
for another great episode with your host Steve Hodgson and psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you are valuable and important. Take time to cherish yourself and those around you. Never forget, your life matters.